Something remarkable is happening in the Pacific Ocean right now, and most people have no idea how fast it is moving. Picture this. It is a Tuesday morning somewhere in the Sea of Japan. A Japanese destroyer cuts through gray water. On its aft deck sits a containerized weapon system. Two 40-aft steel boxes connected by cables humming with focused electrical energy. A target drone is released into the sky. Seconds later, a beam of invisible light, 100,000 watts of concentrated photons, lances across the horizon. The drone doesn't explode. It doesn't spiral dramatically into the sea. It simply stops working, burned, finished at a cost of just a few dollars. Welcome to the new Pacific arms race. While the world's eyes have been glued to Ukraine and the Middle East, something tectonic is taking shape in East Asia. A triangle of strategic tension. China, Russia, and Japan has reached a boiling point that analysts are calling the most dangerous geopolitical flashpoint on the planet. And every week it gets a little hotter. Stay with us for the next 20 minutes because what we are about to walk you through will fundamentally change how you understand the next world crisis. If you haven't subscribed to World Brief Daily yet, now is the perfect time. Hit that button and turn on notifications so you never miss an analysis like this one. Let's begin where this story truly starts. Not with Japan's laser test, not with Russian bombers over the Sea of Japan, but with a single man's obsession and a deadline that has never wavered. Xi Jinping does not hide his ambitions. In speech after speech, in official Communist Party documents, in directives handed down through the People's Liberation Army, the message is consistent and chilling. Taiwan must be reunified with the mainland. This is described as the essence of China's national revival. And in Xi's worldview, this goal must be achieved by 2049, the 100th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. That is 23 years from today, a countdown with a fixed endpoint. But the military establishment in Beijing is not waiting until 2049 to act. According to former commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, Admiral Philip Davidson, China could be ready to pursue its Taiwan objective as early as 2027. That Davidson window, as it has come to be known, has shaped American and Japanese defense planning for years. Defense priorities. A Washington-based research organization notes that China now has 134 air bases within 1,000 nautical miles of Taiwan, with roughly 650 hardened aircraft shelters already built and ready. This is not a country that is bluffing, and China is clear about what it considers Taiwan's legal status. Even though the People's Republic of China has never governed a single day of Taiwan's modern political life, Beijing views the island as a rebellious province, a territory to be reclaimed by diplomacy when possible and by force if necessary. Taiwan's own defense ministry is not operating under any illusions. Officials there have issued assessments that describe a chilling opening scenario for a potential full-scale invasion. The first wave would not come with soldiers on beaches. It would come from the sky. Taiwanese officials have warned that a conflict could begin with between 5,000 and 10,000 missiles launched simultaneously. The objective is brutal in its simplicity. Destroy Taiwan's radars, flatten its airfields, knock out its command centers, and blind the island completely, all within the first 60 minutes. Shock and awe on a scale never seen before. Beijing has purpose-built its arsenal for exactly this mission. The DF-15 and DF-16 short-range ballistic missiles are specifically designed to strike Taipei and its surroundings. The CJ-10 is a low-flying, high-speed cruise missile capable of threading through mountainous terrain to find its targets. And then there is the DF-21D, the weapon that American naval planners lose sleep over. It is specifically engineered to sink U.S. aircraft carriers before they can reach the fight. China calls it a carrier killer. Military analysts call it a game-changer. But here's where it gets interesting. Taiwan has not been sitting still. In recent months, Taiwan received its first Harpoon coastal defense systems, and the delivery was substantial. According to defense reporting, the package includes 100 launchers and 400 land-based RGM-84L4 Harpoon Block II anti-8-ship missiles. These systems are forming the backbone of a new coastal warfare command scheduled to become fully operational on January 1, 2026. This is not a marginal upgrade. It is a structural shift in how Taiwan plans to fight. Local commanders equipped with these systems can engage Chinese naval vessels at long range independent of central command authority. Taiwan's defense doctrine has evolved to prioritize immediate response. When a Chinese missile is detected, local commanders do not wait for orders from Taipei. They act. The Harpoon Block II missiles are derived from U.S. Navy technology, incorporating inertial and GPS navigation developed from JDAM targeting kits and software from the SLAM-ER program. Experts have noted that these systems are specifically hardened to operate in challenging electronic warfare environments, exactly the kind of signal jamming battlefield that China's PLA has trained to create. And Taiwan's calculus goes beyond missiles. These coastal systems also serve another purpose. They complicate China's ability to quietly sever Taiwan's undersea fiber optic cables, the communications arteries that connect the island to the world. In a conflict, those cables are among the first targets. The new Coastal Warfare Command changes that equation, so China's invasion plan has become significantly more expensive to execute. That is the goal. But before we go further into the Taiwan theater, you need to understand the northern dimension of this crisis, because Japan is not just watching what happens across the Taiwan Strait. It is watching what happens right above its own territory. Here is what happened on August 19, 2025. Russia's Ministry of Defense confirmed that two 95 ms nuclear-capable strategic bombers, escorted by Su-35s and Su-30SM fighter jets, conducted a 6-hour patrol over the Sea of Japan. The Kremlin described it as a routine long-range aviation mission, but as reported by Army Recognition, the timing was anything but routine. The patrol came precisely as the United States and South Korea were conducting large-scale joint military exercises. The message was deliberate. This was not a one-time event. Defense Security Asia reported that in January 2025, 4 Tu-95 Ms bombers had already conducted a provocative patrol near Hokkaido, Japan's northern island. These flights form a consistent pattern, a drumbeat of nuclear signaling aimed directly at Tokyo. The Tu-95 MES, known by NATO as the Bear H, is not a relic to be dismissed. Each aircraft carries Kh-101 nuclear-capable cruise missiles with ranges exceeding 2,500 kilometers. That is enough to strike anywhere in Japan without the aircraft ever leaving international airspace. Japan's Air Self-Defense Force scrambled F-15J interceptors to shadow the formation as it entered Japan's air defense identification zone. Russia walked right up to the line and stared. The message from Moscow is explicit. Japan supports Ukraine with money, materials, and diplomatic isolation of Russia. And Russia is reminding Japan that Tokyo sits well within range of nuclear missiles. This creates what defense analysts describe as a two-front pressure campaign against Japan. China threatening from the south, Russia probing from the north. For a nation that constitutionally renounced war in 1945, it is an extraordinary position to be in. And then there is the weapon that most people do not want to talk about. On November 1st, 2025, Russia launched a new submarine, not a conventional attack vessel, not a ballistic missile submarine of the kind that has existed for decades. The Khabarovsk, a Project 09851 nuclear-powered Special Airpost submarine, was launched at the Sevmash shipyard in Siedlce. It exists for one purpose: to carry and deploy the Poseidon 2M39 nuclear torpedo. As detailed in the U.S. Naval Institute's Proceedings Journal in January 2026, the Khabarovsk was designed from scratch around the Poseidon system. It carries 6 of these autonomous nuclear-powered underwater drones, each one between 65 and 80 feet long. The Poseidon operates at depths of up to 3,000 FT and speeds estimated at around 70 knots. In October 2025, President Vladimir Putin personally announced a successful test of the Poseidon's nuclear power unit, stating publicly that Russia had for the first time managed to launch it from a carrier submarine and activate its nuclear power unit under operational conditions. The Poseidon is not designed to destroy a ship. It is designed to destroy a coast, equipped with a nuclear warhead estimated between 2 and 100 megatons by various sources. It is built to detonate near a shoreline, generating a massive radioactive tsunami capable of rendering coastal cities uninhabitable for generations. Russia is moving this capability into the Pacific. The strategic signal could not be clearer. If you intervene in our interests, we can flood your cities. This is the environment Japan has woken up inside. Now, here is where it becomes genuinely remarkable, because Japan's response is not panic, it is transformation. For 7 decades, Japan operated under the constraints of its pacifist constitution, a framework born from the ashes of World War II that formally renounced the right of belligerency. For generations, that constitution was treated as near sacred, defining Japan's international identity as a peaceful trading nation. Defense spending was capped at 1% of GDP. Japan could only defend itself. It could not strike first. That framework is now being systematically dismantled. According to Japan's Ministry of Defense, which released its FY 2026 defense plan in late December 2025, Japan's defense-related expenditures are set to rise to approximately 8.81 trillion yen, roughly $56 billion, representing approximately 2% of GDP. As reported by Army Recognition, Japan's defense spending has now increased for 13 consecutive years. Prime Minister Sai Takaichi personally advanced the 2% GDP target by 2 full years ahead of schedule. Since 1976, no Japanese cabinet had dared breach the 1% ceiling. That ceiling is now gone. And it is not just the money, it is what the money is buying. Japan has signed a $1.7 billion contract with the United States government to acquire 400 Tomahawk cruise missiles. As reported by Naval News in January 2024, the contract covers both Block 4 and Block variants, each with a range of 1,600 kilometers. Japan's defense minister at the time of signing was explicit about why the timeline had been accelerated, stating that in light of the increasingly severe security environment, Japan had determined it was necessary to bring forward its standoff defense capabilities. By fiscal year 2025, 3 Japanese Aegis destroyers, Chokai, Haguro, and Kuroshima, had already been modified to launch Tomahawks. 2 more, Myoko and Atago, are being fitted in fiscal year 2026. This is Japan acquiring the ability to hit targets 1,000 miles away while its ships remain safely beyond enemy weapons range. That is a counter-strike capability. Japan now has it. But Tomahawks are just the beginning. Japan is simultaneously developing what it calls the improved Type 12 surface-to-ship missile in multiple variants: ground-launched, ship-launched, and submarine-launched. The ground-launched version tested successfully in the United States in October 2024, and again in summer 2025 has a range exceeding 1,000 kilometers. As USNI News reported, parts of China and North Korea already fall within striking range from deployment sites on Kalish alone. Beyond that, Japan is developing 2 hypersonic weapons programs: the hypervelocity gliding projectile for island defense, which completed its final test launches in summer 2025, and a separate hypersonic missile platform described as flying beyond Mach 5. These weapons are designed to defeat the dense air defense umbrellas that China has spent decades constructing around its naval task forces, and now the laser. As confirmed by Japan's Ministry of Defense on December 2, 2025, and detailed extensively by Naval News and Army Recognition, Japan has installed a 100-kilowatt class high-energy laser system aboard the experimental test ship JS Asuka at the ISO shipyard. This system has been in development since 2018 under Japan's Acquisition Technology and Logistics Agency, known as ATLA. The program combines domestically produced 10-kilowatt fiber lasers into a single-focused 100-kilowatt beam housed in 2 40-foot containerized units. Kawasaki Heavy Industries won the production contract. What makes this system different from anything that came before? The math. A Patriot missile costs between $3 and $4 million per shot. A standard missile 3 used for ballistic missile defense runs even higher. When China plans to flood the battle space with thousands of cheap drones and cruise missiles in the opening hours of a Taiwan conflict, a missile-based defense has a fundamental structural problem. You run out of interceptors. You simply cannot buy enough expensive missiles to shoot down enough cheap drones. The economics do not work. A laser fires at the cost of electricity. As ATLA itself stated in program documents, so long as sufficient electrical power is available, the system can continue engaging threats without running out of ammunition. Ground-based testing against small drones and live mortar rounds has already confirmed the system's destructive capability. Sea trials aboard JS Asuka are scheduled to begin after February 27, 2026, with live fire tests against drone targets already being contracted for. As noted by Newsweek in December 2025, the U.S. Navy has also forward deployed the laser-armed destroyer USS Preble to Japan since October 2024. Equipped with a 60-kilowatt Helio system fully integrated into the Aegis combat system, the United States and Japan are now operating directed energy weapons side by side in the Pacific. Japan is also advancing an electromagnetic railgun program. As reported by Interesting Engineering, ALE conducted the world's first successful ship-mounted railgun firing test from June to early July 2025, with a projectile fired at a real ship target. Japan's future 13 DDX destroyer class is planned to carry both railguns and high-powered lasers. According to Janes International, as reported by the National Interest, these systems would be capable of engaging high-speed targets, including incoming hypersonic weapons. If fielded, a single destroyer could fire railgun projectiles at Mach 6, targeting the very threat that China is building. This is not incremental improvement. This is a fundamental redesign of how Japan intends to fight. Make sure you are subscribed to World Brief Daily to keep up with this story as it develops. Hit the bell icon so you don't miss our next analysis. Now, back to the big picture, because Japan is not acting alone, and that is perhaps the most important strategic development of all. America's response to the Pacific crisis is playing out on multiple levels simultaneously. U.S. Marines equipped with anti-ship missiles have been stationed on the remote islands of Okinawa, turning the first island chain into what analysts describe as a fortified maritime barrier, a wall that China's Navy cannot breach without catastrophic losses. Japan's deployment of medium-range surface-to-air missiles on Yononi Island, confirmed by Defense Minister Shinjiro Kasumi in November 2025, places Type 03 Chusam batteries on Japan's westernmost territory, just 110 kilometers from Taiwan's eastern coast. Interlocking with PAC-3 Patriot units on Mako Island and Aegis destroyers operating in adjacent waters, these systems create overlapping engagement zones from Taiwan to Okinawa. As Army Recognition analyzed, Chinese air and naval forces cannot operate freely in that corridor. The strategic alliance in the Pacific is widening in ways that would have been unimaginable 10 years ago. Australia long content to maintain cautious neutrality toward China while sheltering beneath the U.S. security umbrella announced in August 2025 that it had ordered 11 improved Megami-class frigates from Japan's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. Australia is simultaneously building nuclear-powered submarines under the AUS agreement with the United States and the United Kingdom. These Virginia-class boats will patrol the Indo-Pacific and provide alliance partners with deep-water strike options that China cannot easily counter. South Korea, despite decades of historical tension with Japan rooted in the Second World War, is now forming a closer security alignment with Tokyo against shared threats from North Korea and an increasingly aggressive Russia. The South Korean KF-21 fighter program represents Seoul's most ambitious indigenous aerospace project, adding another highly capable platform to the regional balance. Even the Philippines, a country that evicted U.S. military bases in 1991, has fundamentally reversed course. In April 2025, Reuters reported that Manila received a second batch of BrahMos supersonic anti-ship missiles from India. And in February 2025, Naval News confirmed the Philippines announced plans to procure submarines for the first time in the nation's history. Japan is also in active informal consultations with Manila about exporting Type 03 surface-to-air missile systems, which could extend the defensive network southward into the South China Sea. A democratic arc of deterrence is being forged across the Indo-Pacific, stretching from Seoul through Tokyo to Canberra, underpinned by American military power and increasingly capable indigenous forces. And here is the bitter irony. Russia's strategy of nuclear coercion and China's military expansion may be the very forces that forged this coalition. As CSIS analysis published in late 2025 concluded, Beijing's divide and rule strategy for the Indo-Pacific is beginning to fail. Rather than keeping democracies fragmented and mutually suspicious, China's military buildup and Russia's nuclear intimidation campaign have accelerated the democratic convergence Beijing most feared. Historical wounds between Japan and South Korea that persisted for 80 years are healing, not out of sentiment, but out of strategic necessity in the face of shared threats from Pyongyang and Moscow. China's strategy for Taiwan depends on speed. Military analysts have warned extensively about what they describe as Beijing's blitzkrieg doctrine. China knows that a prolonged war against the United States and Japan is unwinnable. Their economy depends on maritime trade. A naval blockade enforced over months would devastate Chinese industrial output. Therefore, Beijing's plan is to move with overwhelming speed, crush Taiwan's defenses, establish control of the strait, and present the world with an irreversible fait accompli before American carriers can respond. But the speed window is narrowing. Every Tomahawk deployed to a Japanese destroyer, every laser system undergoing sea trials, every additional Harpoon battery defending Taiwan's coastline, every type missile battery on Yonauni, every Marine anti-H ship missile battery dug into Okinawa. All of these systems are adding days, then weeks to the time it would take China to secure a clean military outcome. And in a conflict with this coalition, days equal defeat. The 2023 CSIS war game on a Taiwan contingency found that in a conventional conflict, the United States and its allies could prevent a successful Chinese amphibious invasion, but at significant cost. The study reported that in the base case, China would lose approximately 138 ships. Japan's expanding arsenal, its lasers, its hypersonic weapons, its Tomahawks, its railgun program is designed to make those Chinese losses even more severe, faster, and from longer range. The question Beijing must answer is this: is unification worth the destruction of the PLA Navy? There is one more dimension that demands attention: the electromagnetic and information domain. China is not standing still while Japan installs lasers and orders Tomahawks. Beijing has been systematically documenting every weakness in Taiwan's and America's electronic architecture. Drone incursions near Taiwanese radar installations, ships conducting surveys of undersea cable routes, electronic warfare exercises timed to coincide with U.S.-Japan joint drills. All of this is intelligence gathering for day one of a conflict. China wants to blind its opponents before the first kinetic weapon is fired. Taiwan's 2025 Hongkwang military exercises, as described by Focus Taiwan in April 2025, explicitly trained against this threat. The drill simulated a scenario in which China began an invasion by masking military forces as civilian sand dredgers and commercial vessels, triggering gray zone ambiguity before the shooting starts. Taiwan practiced identifying and responding to these deceptions at speed. The decentralized trigger-sensitive response doctrine is not just about missiles. It is about surviving the first hours of confusion when China will try to paralyze decision-making. Russia's contribution to this strategic environment is worth examining carefully because Moscow's role is more complex than simple support for Beijing. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, Japan has been one of the most consistent suppliers of material and diplomatic support to Kiev among Asian democracies. Tokyo has provided billions in financial assistance, tightened sanctions in coordination with the G7, and expelled Russian diplomats. Moscow has responded methodically. The Tu-95 bomber patrols are one instrument of pressure. The Poseidon program is another more existential signal, and Russia continues to contest Japanese claims over the Coral Islands, a frozen territorial dispute that Moscow can activate or suppress according to its own strategic convenience. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, in a detailed January 2025 analysis, noted that Russia's strategic nuclear modernization program is facing serious delays due to sanctions, component shortages, and the diversion of industrial capacity to the Ukraine war. The Khabarovsk's Poseidon program has been years behind schedule, but delays do not equal cancellation. Russia launched the submarine on November 1, 2025. The Poseidon is now real. The program is moving forward. What does all of this mean for the shape of the world over the next decade? Let's be precise about what we know and what we can reasonably project. Japan's defense transformation is irreversible. Prime Minister Takaichi has committed to 2% of GDP on defense immediately ahead of schedule. The defense buildup program runs through 2027 and represents the most significant rearmament effort in Japan since the Second World War. A next-generation fighter aircraft is being developed jointly with Italy and the United Kingdom, aimed at deployment in 2035. The 13 DDX destroyer concept, carrying railguns, lasers, and hypersonic interceptors, is being actively designed. Japan is not going back. Taiwan's coastal defense is being fortified systematically. The Coastal Warfare Command becomes operational in 2026. Harpoon batteries are in place. Type 12 missiles are coming online. Taiwan's forces are training explicitly for a decentralized, resilient, deep resistance operation that would make any Chinese occupation politically and militarily catastrophic. The alliance architecture around China is hardening. AUS submarines will begin rotating through Australian bases in coming years. Japan and South Korea are conducting unprecedented levels of defense cooperation. The Philippines has reversed its strategic alignment. U.S. Marines with anti-ship missiles are permanent fixtures across the First Island chain, and China is aware of all of it. The Beijing regime made a decision years ago that Taiwan is worth this cost. Xi Jinping has staked his legacy and the Communist Party's legitimacy on eventual reunification. The question is not whether China will try. The question is whether the deterrent architecture being assembled across the Pacific is robust enough to make the cost of trying prohibitive. Right now, that architecture is being built faster than at any point in the post-Cold War era, but it is not finished. And until it is finished, there remains a window. Military analysts who study Chinese strategic doctrine have argued that Beijing operates on the logic of a closing opportunity. As Japan gets stronger, as Taiwan gets harder to crack, as the U.S. deepens its commitment, the window for a quick, decisive operation narrows. That narrowing window creates its own pressure, not toward patience, but toward urgency. The more formidable the deterrent becomes, the more tempting it may be to act before it fully materializes. This is the paradox at the heart of the Pacific crisis. Building deterrence is the rational strategy, but the act of building it may accelerate the very scenario it is meant to prevent. We are watching in real time one of the most consequential strategic competitions in modern history, lasers being tested at sea.